say it's not your fault.
Thank you for coming. On behalf of election officials statewide, I would like to apologize to the voters who were frustrated or angry with the election experience that they had last Tuesday. I would also like to thank the voters who braved long lines, and especially the poll workers who worked incredibly long hours. Last week and throughout the weekend, I spent my entire time starting to review exactly what happened, and most importantly, to follow up personally with the thousands of voters who contacted our office who were upset. We have some preliminary findings that I will share with you now. The most obvious being, did our office know that there were only going to be 60 polling places in Maricopa County? Yes. Did our office at any time reach out to Maricopa County to advise them that that was not enough polling locations? No. Does our office have the statutory authority to advise or direct the counties on polling locations or numbers? No. Do we agree that polling centers are advantageous to voters? Yes. Yavapai County, Yuma County, Cochise County, Graham County, and the City of Phoenix have all used polling centers versus specific precinct-based polling locations, and it has been wildly successful with voters. One thing we have discovered is that some of these counties carefully eased into the concept of vote centers by doing extensive studies first and adjusting gradually. This was also learned from Colorado election officials as well. Could multiple lines have been formed in polling centers when the lines became long? After speaking with county officials and poll workers, it was determined that there was not an opportune way to divide the lines outside, but they could have split up the lines inside the polling places, as they have done in past elections, by separating the voters who needed provisional ballots versus those voters who were casting a traditional ballot. And in order to accomplish this, polling centers would most likely need drastically more e-poll books to check in voters. And that brings me to another area that we're looking at. We've heard of reports of e-poll books working slowly. And this is where we want voter feedback. Each county uses different equipment, and part of a statewide investigation is finding out what equipment, such as e-poll books, worked well in one county versus what didn't work well in another county. What worked well in, let's say, Yavapai or in Yuma, and should that be replicated here? Could additional machines have been brought into polling places at the last minute? This was something that was also brought up. Each machine is required to be tested prior to the election. And we've heard of no evidence so far that the bottleneck was caused by the actual machines that count the ballots. Could emergency polling locations been opened? The counties could have planned for this as a contingency. A polling place would need to have been AD compliant and added to a county's insurance certificate, and ample parking would need to have been assessed. There would need to have been alternative poll workers recruited and also trained in advance for emergency locations. And so far we have seen no evidence as of yet that there were any spare poll workers in reserve. Our office is also not leaving anything off the table. As election officials, we are all in this together. And what that means is if there's something in this office, the Secretary of State's office, that we could have done better, I want to know about it so that we can fix it. And we have found some things over the past couple of days where we could have performed better too. First, one of our polling place locators was not working consistently. We have 2 websites where there are polling place locators. One is on the Secretary of State website. That one was working as planned. The other one is on a vendor site called VoterView. That one was not working. We are working with our vendor to make sure their system matches our system. Second, in talking to voters, we now know that if voters tried to confirm their registration status on VoterView, the system could not find them. This was because if they entered lowercase letters on their driver's license number, the system was hard-coded to not accept lowercase letters. This is completely unacceptable. We worked with the vendor all night Thursday night to fix this, and we were testing it this weekend, and we'll be testing it as well as this week. Third, for all future elections, the Secretary of State's office needs a dedicated phone line into the counties. We took over 2,000 calls on Election Day. Many of those we were able to serve. Some of those we required the need to talk directly to the counties. And the only thing we could do was get into the queue on the regular county line along with everyone else. We are working with the counties to set up dedicated phone lines. Fourth, our election night reporting software from the Secretary of State's office on the front page showed a bar graph of the number of precincts statewide reporting of the percentage total. However, if you went to the second page, a breakdown page, it showed things such as by county, Maricopa County, 8 out of 8 precincts reporting 100% reported. This was completely confusing to voters, especially those that were still standing in line, waiting to cast a ballot, who had not gone into the polls yet, and saw that 100% reported. There is a very long, detailed legal and IT reason why this information is gathered this way and why it needed to be reported this way, but the fact is, we will make sure that that 100% bar graph is not there by the next election. Going forward, I want to continue hearing directly from voters because that's where we're getting our best information of what happened. We will be hosting a series of public meetings, the exact times and locations to be announced later this week. These will be bipartisan meetings. We expect one to be in Maryvale, one to be in South Phoenix, one in Tempe, and one in Gilbert, as that were the areas that were most affected with high voter turnout. We also anticipate having a meeting outside of Maricopa County in the areas where things went really well to see what we could replicate from those areas into Maricopa. We've also launched a new website portal as well as a new email address where we want to hear directly from voters. That website is www.azsos My Election Story. This is for people to contact us directly regarding the frustrations they experienced. MyElectionStory. It's /, so www.azsos.gov / My Election Story. They can also access it at myelectionstory@azsos.gov. And I know 10 o'clock there is a big elections committee meeting, so I believe we do have time to take a couple of quick questions before we all head down to that meeting. I will be going down there as well.
Did anybody say 60 voting places? Anybody in your office say 60 voting places? That's crazy.
No, we did not, Graham.
Why not?
Because we don't have the statutory authority to direct the counties as far as voting locations or
But three of us did not feel right to.
ARS 16248F. If it's determined by the Secretary of State that compliance with state and federal regulations would be jeopardized, the Secretary of State has the authority to release a county from the number of polling places prescribed by this section. There's a role in here for you.
Brown, we looked it up in our voting handbooks, and we have it's something that the counties decide with the Board of Supervisors. We have no statutory authority.
But Michelle, even if you don't have the statutory authority, don't you have the responsibility, especially with pre-clearance gone, to review county election procedures on your own and say, hey, this doesn't pass the smell test. Here's a letter, here's a phone call, here's some direction from the Secretary of State saying, we don't think you're doing this right. Shouldn't you have that role? Don't you have that role by nature of your position?
I certainly, obviously, I certainly wish that we had said, you should consider 90, maybe you should consider 100, but had we mentioned that, the counties have no obligation to even consider what the Secretary of State offers. We have no jurisdiction over what the counties do regarding polling places.
It's an important point because, as Secretary of State, it's your job ultimately to maybe not order the counties to do something, but at least point out this is not how it should be done. You guys should go back to the drawing table and do that. I mean, didn't you think that this could cause major problems? A place like South Key, you mentioned Maryvale, South Phoenix having one polling place in neighborhoods that areas of the city where a lot of people don't drive, a lot of people are elderly, a lot of people have the habit of going to polling places. They're not, those people who mail in their ballots are not as sophisticated as voters. They haven't been voting for so long, many new citizens. I mean, didn't any of that cross your mind that it's your responsibility to say, hey, this is wrong, we shouldn't do it that way?
Ultimately, it is election officials' responsibility, absolutely, and I wish that we had questioned it.
Isn't it your responsibility? You said the day before the vote, Helen Purcell was doing fantastic work. That appears to be wrong. Isn't it your responsibility to ensure these elections run smoothly and fairly?
Do you take any personal responsibility for what happened last Tuesday?
I believe we're all in this together, absolutely, and I take responsibility for the fact that election officials did not pull off the election that voters deserved.
So let's come back to the whole issue. I know pre-clearance is gone, but the Voting Rights Act is still there. You pride yourself, you have thumped your chest about being the state's elections officer. You know there's Voting Rights Act issues. You know that this state has a history of discrimination, and nothing in Helen Purcell's plan caused you to say, even without pre-clearance, we're in trouble?
Nothing in Helen Purcell's past ever caused anyone to believe that there would ever be any trouble.
We're not talking about the past. We're talking about the plan.
We put our trust in counties, and up until this point, there had never been any indication that there would be any trouble.
The law
So-
gives you the authority.
60? Did you have any reservations about the 60 when you first got the plan from them? Personally, did you? Did you say anything?
Did you know?
Did you look at it and go, that may not be enough? Did you think that?
I did not second guess the county decision or the Board of Supervisors decision, no, sir.
So nothing in your gut
wish
told
would have
you.
now?
I
What
wish
do you
I would
you
have,
done?
yes.
So nothing in your gut
Absolutely.
told you, Michelle, nothing in your gut told you that this doesn't feel right at all, that these polling places just aren't enough for really the largest county in the state.
I wish that they had, so no.
Did you personally look at these plans? Did you know until that press conference Monday, before having that press conference Monday with Helen, that they had this plan? They submitted to you. Do you read them personally before the election?
I was most excited about the fact that there were going to be polling centers where people could go anywhere to vote.
But did
And
you
so,
read her plan personally before Monday?
no, we didn't go through, we went through the polling locations, we went through
Who is we? Are you part of the we?
Yes, myself and Eric and Janine, and some of the polling centers were changing too. I mean, so it's fluid. The best answer and the most truthful answer is I wish I had questioned that 60 were not enough. I did not do that, and for that, I take responsibility.
Did you know
Michele,
that 60
Eric
was a 70%
is a
reduction?
top-notch elections lawyer. He never brought up that this might be a Voting Rights Act issue?
Keep in mind, we do not run the elections in the county, and it is not our practice to step on their toes unless we see something that we think is flagrant. Should we have seen this and
400 or
flagged?
200 to 60 isn't flagrant?
And as I'm saying, I wish that we had flagged this and said something, and for that, we are taking responsibility. I am taking responsibility for that.
Does this office review then the county's plans prior to election day?
We look at the county's plans. We have no ability to change or to statutorily request changes.
Are you aware of the law?
After?
Here it is. It's right here. It says you can do that.
Michele, when you
Well,
wrote on
that's-
Wednesday
It
that,
says you
that
can
you
do
had
that.
no explanation for why the county reduced its number of polling places, had you asked for an explanation up till that point?
I had no idea as to why those locations were chosen, and what I was most concerned with is, and we're still trying to unpack this, were the locations chosen based on turnout of voters, or were they chosen based on where people would go if they could go anywhere? And that's a big difference. And that's what areas who eased into voting centers had looked at. So for instance, you may live in one area, but then when you have the ability to go to any area, you might choose to go to the place where you work or a place where you're driving by. So just choosing locations based on where voters live is sometimes completely different when you go to voting centers.
Wait a second. 3 in Gila Bend? Nobody works in Gila Bend. I mean, none of that crossed your mind to say, huh? Really?
Howie, again, I don't pick the locations. I wish I had questioned the locations, and I am taking responsibility for that.
So where did state funding cuts to the counties play in this whole mess? And should you have pushed harder for that funding to be restored this session?
2 points on that. First of all, at no time has anyone come to me and said they couldn't have the election of their dreams due to the fact that there was no funding or not proper funding. So that had never come up. And to the other point, if you look at the one who's actually been pushing to restore the full funding, that has been this office. The Secretary of State's office has been the one taking the lead to restore the county's full funding and has been for the past 6 months.
But you're also tied to another policy with the elimination. Should that have just been a standalone?
The legislature could have stripped that out at any time. My point has always been very clear about that if the state is going to, and I believe Bram even mentioned this on his show, if the taxpayers are going to pay for something that 1/3 of the voters can't participate in, this office has a problem with that.
And is that still
One
your
more.
position?
That absolutely is my position.
So the bill as written, restoring the money as well as getting rid of the taxpayer funding should go forward in the legislature?
We have
And get a
two.
signature.
We have 2 goals. One is, first and foremost, to make up that difference. We know that it costs approximately $10 million to fund one of these elections. So the counties were not funded that. Everybody knows that. They knew it last year when we first brought it to the legislature's attention. And we sounded the alarm. We were down there, got 2 great sponsors in Senate President Biggs and Speaker Gowan. So make up the difference. And if the taxpayers, if all the voting population can't vote in it, taxpayers shouldn't be paying for it. So legislature, you have a decision to make.
Well, we have the governor last week saying that the PPE should be opened up to all voters. Where do you stand on that?
We completely agree. If an election is going to be funded by the taxpayers, then yes, every voter should be allowed to participate.
Which is preferable?
Last
opening up to
question.
Independents or just getting rid of it entirely?
That is for the legislature to decide. Our position has not changed.
What do you think
Michele,
of
boil it
Bernavich's
down for us in
proposal to
closing.
have?
What is the primary reason why you think there was a disaster done to the county?
Obviously, lack of polling centers in Maricopa County was the biggest reason for long lines, voter frustration.
Do you
How did
welcome
you
the
feel?
Justice Department investigation?
Hearing starting in 5
Do I
minutes,
what?
Do
everybody.
you welcome the Justice Department investigation? There's strong talk about.
We would welcome a Department of Justice investigation. We have no problem with facts coming out and with the truth coming out.
Okay, what do you think of the AG's
10
proposal
o'clock, guys.
to limit information before voters are finished voting
Here we go.
about the results of the
Ready?
election?
10 o'clock. We can catch her.
I w-
She's going to be downstairs.
Yeah, that is.
I'm sorry. Can you?
Yeah, the AG proposed that maybe a law should be passed that results of an election shouldn't be released until people are done voting. What do you think?
We actually had that internal discussion on election night of whether we should release the results or not, and counties were already starting to release their results on their websites. And so, as we said, if we didn't post our results, all that anyone would have to do would be the media would just have to go to 15 different websites and add them up.
But no, that doesn't answer the question. What do you, Mark Bernovich told me, I want to change in Title 16 that says no results can be released.
And that,
until all-
and
what's your opinion?
Howie,
on
that would be fine with us if that's something that the state law right now, as it is exactly what we followed on election night. But if the law was to change, we would certainly follow it just the same. That we have no opinion on that. We would support it just fine.
How
you vote,
widespread
Secretary?
would
Next.
how widespread would the problem have to be to delay telling 6 million Arizonans what the results were? If
I
one
don't
polling
think the
place
media
was
would like it, but.
Well, no, if one polling place was open in Gila County because of a glitch, does that mean that the whole state can't do it? I mean, it seems like there's a lot of...
Again, we're going to follow the law as it is written. We had that question come up at election night, and we followed it to the letter of the law.
We'll see you downstairs. We'll see you downstairs.
Did you vote, Secretary?
Did I vote?
In Tuesday's election, did you vote?
Oh, I voted by mail.
Okay.
But absolutely, I always vote.
All right, everybody, that was the Secretary of State talking about the election problems last week. We are not going to go